Hello there, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. Hope everyone's 2024 is off to a fantastic start. I am still struggling to get some of my energy back after my Christmas COVID adventure, but I can smell food again, and the taste is coming back. Not quite as quickly as I would like, but for the most part, I can taste everything, and most things taste the way they used to. So that is good news. It's just the struggle with getting my energy back, and I don't know if that's so much perhaps lacking energy or my whole sleep schedule got thrown out of whack and trying to get back into the grind of work is more of the problem. Or if it's a combination of that. Anyway, that is what's happening in my life. Very exciting stuff. Although I am kind of excited, the first real major winter storm is set to roll in tomorrow. So my snow shovel is at the ready, and who knows if it will actually happen or whether it'll be snow or rain. It's one of those things where the forecasters even the I don't know 6 hours before it's supposed to start precipitating here are still a bit confused as to what is actually going to happen. So, with all of our technology, it's amazing how Mother Nature can still kind of have the upper hand. But since it's a new year and we've hit 2024, I was really looking for a theme to develop as we go through this year on the podcast. And I know last week's episode didn't really have a theme. It was just kind of there because, well, with COVID, really there was a whole lot of brain fog, and critical thinking wasn't something that was, I don't know, in the forefront of my mind, or having the ability to really critically think and process. But as that fog went away and the COVID lifted, I've come up with a plan for the podcast that'll at least take us through the first half of the year, probably even longer. But my glorious idea, and I hope you will enjoy it, is that 2024 is going to be a BDSM Odyssey. And so we're going to have a nice journey into the lifestyle in 2024. Now, that brings us to, where do we start? I mean, every journey starts with taking that first step. So, where do we take the first step on this podcast odyssey? And, well, how about at the beginning? And I know some of you are experienced and might roll your eyes at me, but I think it'll be fun. I know I had fun going back to the beginning and really starting from, what is BDSM? That's going to be our starting point on this journey. We're going to start with, what is BDSM, and go forward from there. So if you're sitting there going, "Oh, I already know the answer. I've been involved in the lifestyle," hear me out. Perhaps you'll hear some different takes, different ways of looking at things, and find a few nuggets of wisdom. And if you are experienced, please also feel free to join the conversation. Send a message afterwards, send a thought. Those are always welcomed. And we can kind of build the Odyssey as a community if you are willing to participate. And if not, I will just keep on talking. I'm very good at that. So that is the plan. Um, as of this moment in time, I seriously have 25 weeks of podcast kind of laid out, planned out. Not really planned out, but the subject matter is there, with one building on the next, and so on and so forth. Haven't gotten around to actually making notes on 25 podcasts. That feels a bit overwhelming to my brain as I'm getting back into the swing of work. So that isn't there. But 25 is laid out, which, even if the Odyssey doesn't go beyond 25 episodes, that's still going to take us pretty much halfway through this amazing year of 2024. So there is the podcasting plan, at least for the first half of this glorious year. And let's just jump into it. So, what is BDSM? And it's funny because we always say BDSM when actually we should be probably saying, if we're really going to use the acronym, we probably should be saying BDDSSM. And that's because what BDSM stands for, it stands for bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadism, masochism. And that's a whole mouthful to spit out. So I am very glad that we have shortened it to BDSM, or I would get tongue-tied and twisted trying to say all that on a podcast episode. So let's just look at each of those wonderful letters and what they mean. Bondage, I mean, it sounds quite simple, but there's more to it than just bondage because when I hear the word bondage, I don't think of bondage in the BDSM way. My brain defaults, and maybe it's because I am a history nerd and it's an area I've studied, but my brain defaults when somebody says bondage, I think slavery. I think of a human being held in bondage. I don't think of a human being consensually, willingly, say, tied up and enjoying that aspect of the lifestyle. It's just not where my mind goes. So I am curious I mean, what does that word bring to mind for you? Does your mind go to where mine does, or do you think of the lifestyle when somebody says bondage? And here in the lifestyle, bondage simply means it's the consensual practice of restraining or tying up um, your partner for either erotic or aesthetic pleasure. Or, that aesthetic pleasure could also be combined with erotic. They can go hand in hand. That's where you see some of the intricate rope bondage. It's very aesthetically pleasing, very, very time consuming, but it is amazing to look at. It's not something that I have the patience to do, but it is amazing to see others do it. Um, the important thing, of course, is to remember is it's all consensual. Um, Unlike the way my mind goes when it hears bondage, this is all done consensually. There are safe words, there's stop, and at any point in any time, anybody involved in the scene can stop it and have a break, refocus, or just permanently end it. We have all that wonderful thing called consent. Then, of course, next up is discipline. And I think when most people in the lifestyle hear discipline, they tend to think of a dominant punishing their submissive. Their submissive was naughty. You were going to get discipline. Um, or I saw Shawshank Redemption over the weekend, and what is it that the warden says here? You'll get um, something. It was something like you'll get the Bible in discipline or something like that. Anyways, when we tend to think of discipline, we tend to think of, the punishment, the corrective nature, or the that side of DS where the dominant is enforcing, upholding the rules that have been laid out in the relationship. But discipline is more than that for me. I believe that discipline is dedication. DS takes dedication, it takes discipline. You have to dedicate yourself to your partner or partners. It doesn't matter your role. You have to be disciplined and dedicated to them. And also, um, the whole kind of getting back to that whole the traditional sense that people think of discipline, the use of rules and punishments. There's a better way to motivate a submissive, in my mind, than punishment, and that is rewards. And so, rewarding a submissive for doing well, for meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, for me, is more powerful than the power of the opposite, the punishment. And that rewarding side would fall under discipline. And kind of going, discipline, when you think discipline, you think of the dominant because the dominant is the one all in charge during the disciplinary side of things, if you will. So the next part, D is for dominance. Um, I guess if you're a bad dominance, maybe it also stands for dumbass. Or going with Shawshank, Dumas. Anyway, Alexander Dumbass. Sorry. Um, anyway, but dominance is next, and it's the exercising control or authority over a submissive partner. And dominance doesn't have to mean 24/7 in your relationship that the dominant is in charge of the proceedings or the relationship. It's consensual. There are people who just are dominant or submissive in the bedroom or during playtime. And every person and every relationship is unique, how that flows. So it's important not to think of dominance as a 24/7 mentality. It can be, and it is for many, but there's also various other ways that the lifestyle is practiced. And of course, if we have dominance, then we have the opposite, which is submission. Now, the submission does not mean that a person is weak. In fact, I would argue it takes incredible strength to submit to a dominant partner. And it's, once again, done consensually. It's not something that a dominant can take, they can't assume it. It has to be freely given. Um, so, that, of course, is submission, the opposite of dominance. And then we run into the next S, and this is sadism. And yes, sadism is a person or the acts of taking pleasure from inflicting pain on somebody. Now, that pain doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be um, barehanded spanking or the crack of a whip. Um, Sadism can also be mental. Uh, you could put humiliation under sadism. I mean, or people who enjoy for lack of a better word, a mind fuck. That all can be part of what it means to be a sadist. There are dominants and submissives out there who are more mental sadists. They are into the having their minds messed with or messing with others' minds, rather than the way that I think most of us would think of sadism as the physical acts that inflict pain, like physical pain, where ouch, that hurts. But for a masochist or masochism, the opposite of sadism, that ouch, that hurts pain is often turned into a pleasurable sensation or um, obviously we're doing this consensually, of course. Have to throw in the consent disclaimer, as I often do. But the way a person who identifies as a masochist um, takes and receives pain, the way it's processed in their mind, is typically different than your vanilla person, and there's a distinct pleasure that they get from receiving pain, just as the sadist takes a unique pleasure in the giving of pain. So it's a really a mutual satisfaction thing where everything within DS, if you will, is I was looking here on my desk as I was talking. I like to talk with my hands. I've thought about getting a camera so you could see how I do this, but um, I haven't yet because I'm probably a little bit shy about it because I do talk with my hands. But as I was saying, with everything being mutual in a lifestyle, it's very much like a coin. You have the two sides of the coin. And if you just have one side of the coin, you have something that has really no value, but you need both sides. And for everything to flow and to work within DS, you need to have that coin with two sides. The dominant on one side, the submissive on the other, or the sadist on one side, the masochist on the other. Uh, it all is hand in hand and it all works hand in hand. It's uh, if you have somebody who's a sadist without a masochist, or somebody, it gets into that whole consent violation because they're not consenting, and then that person is not a sadist. they're an abuser. So it's all very symbiotic. No, and I apologize for that. That is if I was on a conference call for work, one of my peers, we probably have gotten a conference call corporate bingo off of that because it's one of those little corporate words that gets thrown around. So I apologize for using a wonderful, popular conference call word that is just a big word that shouldn't be used when you could just simply get to the point and say it. Um, the other thing with BDSM, it's a very diverse world. It is not just whips and chains, sadist and masochist and dominants and submissives. Yeah, there's a whole way to explore this world without really getting into what I would say maybe is the hardcore way that most vanilla people tend to think of the lifestyle as, being the whips, the chains, the smacks, the ouches, and the extreme way that it is often portrayed in our media. Um, BDSM can be very soft, it can be very sensual, it can involve role playing, gentle explorations. It doesn't have to be, a whip. It can be a bare hand if you want to explore spanking. Um, if you're curious about sensations, you can use uh, specially designed candles and candle wax so you have the warmth, but not to the point where it's going to be too warm and cause burning. Or you can just use something as simple as a blindfold, and that can adjust how we all sense and feel and explore things. The dynamics don't have to be harsh or hard or extreme. It can be very gentle. Even dominance can be done in a gentle way. There are people out there who are dominants who are not into inflicting pain. Um, Believe it or not, there are dominants who are not into kinky sex, just as there are submissives who are not into, hanging, swinging from the chandelier sex. The reason that they're drawn to the lifestyle is for the dominant being the leader and the submissive um, having following the lead of their dominant and consensually allowing their dominant to make certain choices for them. So you have a vast array of experiences, activities that happen in the lifestyle, and contrary to what you see on the latest crime drama or movie that might be out there or a romantic fictional book, it often is very much softer and more sensual than the way the general world tends to think of the lifestyle. And it's the same with the power dynamics that come into play, the dominant and the submission. It doesn't have to be 24/7 where one partner is, you know, in charge of this areas of the relationship and the submissive follows, and this is how it is all the time. Um, there are a million ways to do it from where it's just a something done to spice things up in the bedroom to very mild, you can lead here but not there. Very limited DS partnerships to very inclusive DS partnerships where it covers and includes many things. And through it all of these dynamics are negotiated. They're every BDSM relationship is unique. So it can be very easy, especially with the way social media works and the way we, as as people, the way we tend to judge others' relationships, or we look at our relationship and we want to try and judge it to be more. I don't know, how does my relationship compare to their relationship? All those things that typically come from, I guess, our fixation in social media in some ways. But we need to remember that everyone's unique, and what works for other people may or may not work for us. And so it's important not to expect our lifestyle partnerships. if we choose to enter them, um, aren't going to resemble what others' partnerships look like. We could perhaps borrow something we like from that partnership over there and take from that one over there, but we're really crafting something that is very unique, very individualized. And the other thing about all lifestyle relationships is they're dynamic and they're fluid. And this kind of goes against that pop culture narrative where it's very rigid. The, the dominant is very domineering and is in charge and makes all the choices, and the submissive is meek and mild and just says yes and follows right along. Life, even if that was your ideal lifestyle relationship, life doesn't come at us like that. Life is always throwing us curveballs, and just when you think, boy, life is sure going swell, it's like that's when life changes it up and throws a new challenge at us. And our relationships have to be dynamic, they have to be fluid, they have to be able to adjust to the pressures that are getting put on partners at different times. So, what may be an intense VS relationship at some points. At other points, that lifestyle component might soften and become more gentle and more fluid and all of those things because the pressures of life, for example, might be pushing in on the relationship, and that's where the partnership needs to be at that point in time. So, lifestyle relationships are just like life. They are dynamic and they're ever changing, they're ever evolving, they're never going to stay the same. You can never go back to where it was. All you can do is learn from what was in your rearview mirror and apply it to what is coming at you in your headlights. Uh, the other thing that's very important, I have jokingly said with a few of my lifestyle friends, that 2024 is going to be the year of consent. I want to talk about consent a lot because there are far too many people in the lifestyle that have had and will have, unfortunately, their consent violated. So, the brief consent soapbox period for you tonight on the podcast is just a simple reminder that everything that happens in BDSM happens with consent. It happens where everyone involved understands what's happening, understands the activities that are going to happen, have the right and the ability to revoke consent at any point in time, and that revoking of consent, should someone do that, is respected by everyone involved. Everything that happens, consent is the cornerstone of. The other thing to understand about BDSM is that it's very emotional, it's very psychological. The trust that gets built in a relationship, in the lifestyle, is fantastic. And for me, it feels much deeper, much more intense than what somebody who is vanilla would experience. Now, perhaps that's just because I've learned that vanilla isn't the flavor for me, and because the lifestyle is my flavor, and it does fit, therefore it feels more intense. So perhaps it's just a feeling derived from my own personal preferences. But I know that I'm not the only one that says that. The emotional and psychological aspects are often more intense than what we've experienced in the past with, excuse me, with our vanilla partners in the past. Um, the other wonderful thing is that there's a wonderful emphasis on this lifestyle about aftercare, which is hands down my favorite part of the BDSM playtime experience is the aftercare when you are with your partner after the play is done. That is the best part. There's an incredible amount of like trust building that happens in that, and through it all, um, no matter how you explore, whether you tiptoe or you kind of run into the lifestyle pool, there is so much potential for personal growth that the lifestyle can bring an individual. And even if you explore the lifestyle and say, this is not for me. The exploration will have led to such wonderful personal growth that even though you'll be like, yeah, I explored it, it's not for me, you are still coming out with a really a much more authentic version of yourself because you've been open and honest and done a lot of discovery about yourself. So the emotional and psychological aspects, which obviously are not really highlighted in pop culture, are truly some of the most amazing parts of BDSM. And on top of that, because the lifestyle is kind of a niche thing, we have this wonderful big umbrella term that we call community, the community. Now, the community is basically the networks, support networks that are out there to support all of you fantastic kinky folks. And for example, listening to my podcast, you could say you are taking part in the community. Even though I'm just having a conversation with you, there's community in that. You're hearing somebody talk who might have similar interests to you, and you're realizing that you're not alone. And through it all, this whole big umbrella of community, it's a great place to network, to make friends, to learn from others. However, there are some things to know also about the community. Anytime you have a group that gathers of people, there's always going to be a couple of rotten apples in the group. So we need to be aware and be on the lookout to make sure we don't fall victim to a bad apple. Um, and I don't mean that the Apple that is a cornerback, I think for the Miami Dolphins, even though he did blow some coverages last night in the game, I wouldn't say he's a bad apple. In fact, because he plays in the NHL or NFL, he could probably whoop my butt with one hand behind his back. So anyway, sorry, tangent, Apple just came to my head. Uh, we'll call it one of those weird COVID moments, or maybe just one of my squirrel moments. Look, squirrel. But we have the community, which has wonderful, great aspects. It also does have some bad actors, which we need to be aware and educated on how to avoid those people. The other thing is the community can't save you. Oftentimes, you'll see, for example, over on FetLife, you'll see somebody complaining that a community leader didn't, in their mind, do enough to save them or help them or what have you. Um, Community leaders, people that are leaders in local groups or online groups, um, for the most part, are genuinely great people. They're being leaders in the community for the compensation, the amazing compensation of $0 and 0 cents. Or if they are, say, given a little something to present at a class, um, oftentimes it would not even buy you a Big Mac and fries. So you have to understand that community leaders are not there to save you. They can only do so much. They cannot, there's not they're not like the BDSM police, um, designed to say, oh, you know, that person's a good person, get to know them. That person over there, I'm not too sure about. That person over there, I think is a slime ball. Stay away from them. And in fact, things like that, because it's a community and because we live in the society that we do, you really can't effectively, even in person, say, good person, questionable person, slime ball, good person, good. You can't do that. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. It is good to have friends, and it's good to have friends share experiences, and friends maybe share experiences of people that they've come in contact with that have been less than. That is fantastic, but don't look to the umbrella of the community or people that are presenters or otherwise leaders to be a safety net for you. The only person in the lifestyle that can keep you safe, or safer, as I like to say, the only person in the lifestyle that can keep you safer is yourself. So please remember that as we continue to explore. Now, BDSM, of course, we talked about how the media misrepresents it often. There are a whole lot of misconceptions that are out there. No, I'm not going to dive into all of them because we'd be here until, I don't know, two more winter storms roll through my neck of the woods. There's that many. But we're just gonna tap a couple. First is that BDSM is always about pain. That like if you were curious about BDSM, either you want to inflict pain or you want to have pain inflicted upon you. And remember that pain doesn't have to always be physical. It can be those who enjoy the mental pain, like humiliation. But that is not at all the case. There are many, many people who are both dominant, submissive, switches, or tops or bottoms that are just enjoying the lifestyle casually, where pain is not part of the process. Now, since pain wouldn't be part of their process, I don't know if they listen to the 90s group, The House of Pain. I don't know about that. Perhaps they still do. But anyways, it's just a myth that, BDSM is always about the whips and the chains and the pain as pleasure. Next up is that BDSM is abusive. And it is not, because remember, consent is a cornerstone, and there's a saying. I would love to take credit for it, but I can't. It's been around as long as I can remember. And that is one word will stop a BDSM scene. And in case you don't know what a scene is, real quickly, a scene is just BDSM playtime. You are engaging in some sort of BDSM play with your partner. It's a scene. Um, So one word will stop a BDSM scene, meaning safe word. A safe word will stop a BDSM scene, where 1,000 words will never stop abuse. So because everything that happens within the lifestyle happens with informed consent, and it happens with um, um, obviously informed consent, but we also have the ability to revoke that consent at any time. Sorry, those words eluded me for a second. But since we can start a scene, we can control the scene, we've negotiated what's going to happen in the scene, we're excited about the scene, we understand what is and what isn't going to happen. There's boundaries, there's limits, and there's safe words. Everything that's happening is happening consensually with trust and communication and all that yummy goodness. And then finally, the last myth that I want to real quickly touch upon is that only damaged or broken people engage in BDSM. Um, well, I am sorry. Everybody on this planet, everybody on the third rock from the sun, once you hit adulthood, and it doesn't matter whether you live in outer Mongolia or the U.S. outlying minor islands, or Michigan, or England, or Germany, or New Zealand, wherever you live, once you hit adulthood, we all have got some damage. Okay? We all have had bumps, bruises, and all of that stuff. And some of us have had it rougher than others. Um, I don't consider myself coming to BDSM out of any sort of trauma, damage, or anything else other than when I discovered it, it felt like home. The more I researched it, the more I dug into it, the more homey it felt. Um, the more home-like it felt. And it is really true. There's everyone is going to have some damage. Everyone is going to have, broken something inside their mind at some point. We're all unique, damaged people. Face it, we are. So really we could say that only damaged and broken people play soccer, or only broken and damaged people go to see the baby Jesus every Sunday. We're all broken, we're all damaged. Deal with it. The thing about the lifestyle, because we prioritize open communication, we prioritize honesty, it's a place where people will open up and talk, actually talk and share their stories. So you'll hear people share their truths. And rather than sit around in a with a group of people, say at a hockey game, where you don't talk about things like that, especially if you're a guy out with the guys, you certainly don't talk about things that went bump in your life. Um, and when your friend is thinking he's having a heart attack, you call him Fred Sanford and ask him if it's the big one. Um, it's a different mentality in the lifestyle. It's a place where you can share um, your experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And because we have that diversity of individuals within the community that are open and honest, if you're looking in from the outside, you may be thinking that there are some like that myth somehow is true, and the reality is because we're an accepting place, an accepting community, creating safe places, people talk about things they would normally not share with other people. So there's all of that wonderful goodness. And then finally, as I said, we have consent to keep things uh, as a cornerstone that helps keep us safe. And then we actually have, there's really four main ways that people negotiate, communicate, and practice um, safer play when it comes to lifestyle. There's actually systems. There's SSC, which is safe, sane, and consensual, which I believe is by far the most popular one that's out there. Then there's risk aware consensual kink. Um, and then we have one of the newer kids on the block with this. It's called Prick. No, once again, we're not talking about gentleman sausage, but we're talking about personal responsibility, informed consensual kink. And then finally, we have the four C's, which is um, kind of maybe a little vague sounding. Caring, communication, consent, and caution. So, since this is kind of the newest one, and kind of comes to the lifestyle actually out of academia, there are some people studying the lifestyle, and the four C's sort of came out of their research, and if you Google it, you can read it. It's an interesting read. Or if the way research reporting is written up, um, maybe it won't be interesting to you, but it might help you sleep. But anyway, um, caring is just being attentive, responsible, and responsive, and committed to the safety and well-being of others, and also very importantly yourself. Communication, it's exactly that. It's being open, it's being honest, and being clear with your wants, desires, and limits. That's pretty simple. And of course, consent. Every one of these has consent. Remember, it's consent, consent, consent. 2024, the year of consent. And then finally is caution. And what caution means is being aware of the risk. Pretty much everything we do in the lifestyle carries, when it comes to play, carries risk. Even a Pulling your partner over your knee and giving them a barehanded spanking has a level of risk. There's a possible danger there. So, caution is understanding the risk. Everyone involved understands the potential for risk, they understand the possibility of the dangers, and are going to proceed carefully. So, the lifestyle has built in safeguards that go along with consent. So, this has been kind of the first episode where we have uh, kind of started the journey into 2024 BDSM Odyssey. I guess since I kind of might have made a few religious references in there tonight, perhaps we should call this 2024 a BDSM Odyssey in the beginning. Um, and we'll leave it at that and not try and go any farther into the book of Genesis, thankfully. But I want to thank everyone for giving this podcast a listen tonight. I hope your 2024 is off to a fantastic start. Avoid the Christmas COVID. It really does screw up your holidays and immediately thereafter. Um, but anyway, we will end on the positive note that I can't wait to chat with you again next week, where we continue our odyssey into BDSM, where we continue to dive deep or start diving deeper in and exploring the lifestyle a bit more than just scratching the surface and discussing kind of what it is. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please click the follow button no matter what platform you live on or listen on, not live on. I hope you don't live on Spotify or Apple Music. There's much more to life than those types of platforms. But if you do, it suggests some new songs I could enjoy kind of sprucing up my playlist for 2024. So, on that note, once again, please follow the podcast wherever you listen, and I will chat with you next week, same time, same place.